a bit of time. So now I would like to invite Duncan to come up and introduce someone whom everybody should know intimately, seeing he's the MP for Wellington, Grant Robertson.
That's the first two lines gone.
I'm saving your time.
Yes, Grant Robertson is in fact the MP for Wellington Central, and as such has been an honorary member of this club for many years and has spoken to us on more than one occasion. He's Labour's finance spokesperson, and you may have seen in the press recently Andrew confirmed that if he wins the next election, you have a job. You're the one person with job security. You will be the Minister of Labour. Finance. He's also the chair of the Future of Work Commission. It's a commission I'm not really familiar with, and he's taken some of their work as the topic of his speech today. He'll be talking about the future of work and talking about a document that the commission has produced. 10 big ideas from our consultation. A bit about Grant. Born in 1971 in Palmerston North, lived in Hastings for a while, then settled in Dunedin with his family. He was raised with strong Presbyterian values, which has led to a strong belief in social justice. Studied politics at the University of Otago, graduated BA with honours, campaigned against the user pays in education, which led to him being the president of the Otago University Students' Association. I know we've got about 3 in our club that were presidents of the association. Peter Cullen? No. He then went on to become the vice president and then the co-president of the New Zealand Students' Association. He worked for the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Trade, and while with them, managed the overseas aid program to Samoa and spent many months living in Samoa, which was a unique experience he enjoyed. He followed that with a stint with the United Nations, working in New York for 2.5 years on environment and development issues. On his return, he became an advisor to Marion Hobbs, who was then the Minister of Environment, and moved to the office of the former Prime Minister Helen Clark as an advisor in there. He then went on to do research business the role of research business manager for University of Otago's Wellington School of Medicine. And in 2008, when Marion Hobbs retired from Wellington Central as the MP, he won the electorate by 1,904 votes. In 2011, his majority was 6,376, and in 2014 he grew it to 8,267. He was Deputy Prime Minister from 2011 to 2013, and the Labour Party finance spokesman since 2014. He had previous roles with Labour involving employment, skills and training, economic development, tertiary education, state services, health, the arts, culture and heritage. He is a member of the Finance Expenditure Select Committee. He chairs the Jobs and Growth Caucus Committee. He and his partner Alf live in Northland, or Wilton. He's passionate about sports, a fan of New Zealand music and literature, and he loves cooking and movies. Would you please welcome Grant?
Thank you very much indeed. Kia ora, good afternoon. I'm not the Deputy Leader unless something's happened in the last hour, which is not impossible, but as far as I know, I did hold that role for a while. Not Deputy Prime Minister either, Duncan, although that sounds like an interesting job at some point. I did want today to talk mostly about the future of work. I'm quite sure that you might have some questions on other topics as well. James Austin's here, so he can ask me about fundraising for political parties if he likes. Okay, very good. But other topics for questions, including, marriages of political parties and who wants to date who before elections, are all welcome as well. But I do want to spend a few minutes talking about this project called The Future of Work. And I've done a presentation, and what you're seeing here is a presentation that goes with a much longer session, so I'm not going to run through all the slides here. But at the beginning of these sessions, and I've done about 70 of them around the country now, I asked people just to yell out what your first ever paid job was. Anthony, what was yours?
Window cleaner.
Window cleaner. Anyone else? Kerry?
Paper delivery boy.
Paper delivery, yep.
I worked in a retail store in Tawa.
Retail store in Tawa, yep.
Haymaking.
Haymaking.
I was a
Nurse aid? Cows. We usually get picking raspberries. Anyone pick raspberries as their first paid job? Yeah. I was the fruit and veggie boy at the South City New World supermarket. I can assure you there is a particular and correct way to cut a pumpkin up, and I'm happy to give lessons about that. The reason we mention that is because I'm not trying to, and the Labour Party in forming the Future of Work Commission is not trying to pretend that jobs haven't changed, that things don't always change. But what we are seeing is an unprecedented period of change in the world of work. And we can't predict the future, but we do at least have to plan for it. Or we could take the option of just waiting around and seeing what happens, but we're not really prepared to do that, because otherwise New Zealanders and New Zealand will suffer. Why is the Labour Party doing the Future of Work position? For Oliver, who's the only person in the room under the age of 40, he already knows that that's Norman Kirk because he cares about politics. But the Labour Party, it's in the name. And we're in our centenary year this year, the Labour Party, and so we've been focusing a lot on what is work, what's the meaning of work, how do we value it, and what does it look like in the 21st century? How do we take the values that Norman Kirk is espousing there and put them into a 21st century context? And so that's part of the purpose of what we're doing. In the course of the year and a bit that we've been doing this project, I think one of the things I wanted to stress was what is the value of work? And quite clearly income is a significant aspect of the value of work. But I think the Labour Party and probably other political parties over the years have made some errors in when we talk about work, talking about jobs. Labour always says we're the party of jobs. The fact is that for very many people, a job is the means to the end of the choices that they want to make in their lives. And I think sometimes we get a little fixated on that and less on what being in work brings. But those other values that you'll see written there, security, dignity, fulfilment and social cohesion, when surveys are done, Jane Bryson, a professor at Victoria University, has done some work with us. 3,000 people she surveyed asking, what is it about work that means the most to you? It's actually those other ones down there, and particularly that sense of fulfilment, that sense of being part of something bigger than yourself. And so I think it's important that we don't just dwell on the fact that it's about what you get paid. Work has an intrinsic value. As Duncan mentioned, I come from that Calvinist tradition that tells you that you should work and then do some more work and then hopefully do a bit more after that. And so I think that more broadly, though, applies in terms of what we want. And the quote down the bottom there is from Derek Thompson, who's written a lot on the subject of the future of work. And he says, the paradox of work is that many people hate their jobs, but they're considerably more miserable doing nothing. And I think that is a valid point. So why are we doing it? The nature of work is changing. It's changing fast. As I say, there has always been change in the workplace, but that's the statistics in that first bullet point there come from a McKinsey study, saying 10 times faster and 300 times the scale of the Industrial Revolution. And I think any of you can think about your own daily lives as to how much things have changed just in the last few years. You can go into the supermarket, not interact with a human being, and out the door. You do all of your banking online, you do all of your travel online. Everything is changing in that way. And it is, the pace of change is absolutely incredible. NZIER did a study last year, and 46% of jobs in the New Zealand economy are at high risk from automation in the next 2 decades. Now, we can talk about the ones we can talk. There's a member of my family who worked on one of the lines at Mitsubishi Motors in Porirua, and his job was to be the storeman, and his job has been fully automated. So if you are sitting on the line and you want a part, you plug it into the computer screen at each end of the line, and a robotic arm will get the part, put it on a conveyor belt, and it'll arrive in front of you. So he had to go off and find another job. He's been driving around delivering frozen chickens for Tegel. We haven't had the conversation yet about the drone and the driverless car that will soon take his current job. But it's not just in those more manual labour type jobs. The most at-risk profession, and the reason that NZIER did that study, is accountancy. So apologies to all the accountants or former accountants in the room. But accountancy, because of fantastic developments like Xero and MYOB, is now the most at-risk profession. So that's one of the big differences as well. Now, this is not to say that other jobs won't be created. They will be. There's a significant debate about whether or not enough jobs will be created to continue the same levels of full-time paid work that we've become used to. But certainly jobs will be created. But we cannot afford as a country to sit around and wait to see how that works out. We've got to be preparing and planning ourselves for that. Young workers likely to have 17 different jobs in 5 different industries. That's people leaving work today. I don't think anyone here continues to believe that most people working today will have one job throughout their lives and get their gold watch at the end of it. But this is the kind of level of change. And this is a slide from a report by this organisation called the Foundation for Young Australians, looking at what the future of work is for today's 15-year-old. And you'll see there they've got the 3 big mega trends, as they call them: automation, globalisation and collaboration. Essentially what we do, where we do it and how we do work. And as we've been discussing, automation obviously making a huge difference. Globalisation, the idea that your customers can be anywhere in the world, a click of the button away, but equally that the workforce is globalised as well, that people will move around the world following where there is work too. The collaboration point is important. This is the notion that people will have multiple employers at any one time. You're possibly going to be employed by yourself, you might work for somebody else, but that notion of having a much more collaborative work experience. And clearly, as it says there, there's massive opportunities here. Great, huge lowering of barriers. I give a prize out to secondary school students in my electorate, and 2 young women from Wellington East Girls College won it a couple of years ago, and they came to see me at the end of their first year at university to thank me for the money that it, and I said, oh, that's fantastic, what are you doing in the holidays? Expecting that they would say to me, oh, I'm going to be working in a supermarket or a bar. And they produced their business cards, and they've started a design company. And I thought, this is very interesting. And a few weeks later, I was on the Air New Zealand plane, and in the Koru magazine, there was their logo, and they were being written up. And there's a generation of young people for whom the sort of barriers that even somebody one half generation ahead of them, me, I would never have thought that. You went to university, you learned, and then you did something. Those barriers are gone. Their entire marketing channel is Facebook for these 2 young women. So fantastic opportunities, flexibility, but clearly there are risks. The risk of unemployment I've already discussed. Inequality growing is probably the thing that seizes me the most in this. If you're the person that's got the skills to write the app that means that I can sit here and look at my phone now, which is actually on a stopwatch at the moment, just for Kerry, that is. But I can look down at my phone now and see an app that'll tell me all the breaking news in the world. If you're the person who knows how to write that, your value in the workplace is exponentially increasing. If you're that member of my family who I described before, who's done manual labour jobs and left school without any qualifications, in this new world of work, your value will progressively decrease. And that widening gap of those who have the skills and the attributes that are desired at the moment and those who don't is a big risk from this changing nature of work. And the other point is around insecurity. Flexibility at work is fantastic. The idea that you can build your work around your life is something that I think we would all value. If flexibility is forced upon you, it's not flexibility at all. And when I was doing a presentation about this a while back, we were talking about the concept of secondary tax and how secondary tax came to be. If you're needing to do 2 or 3 jobs just to get by, that's actually not a level of flexibility that you like. It's also money that you need in your pocket immediately, not that you can claim back at the end of the year. And so this changing nature of work and the insecurity of work is one of the really big dynamics. Insecurity when you're younger can sound fantastic, flexibility. When you start having kids and wanting to buy houses and things, security of employment makes a lot more sense. So that's kind of the trends of where we are now. Just to make sure you don't think it's all science fiction, these are 2 headlines from the New Zealand Herald. One from last year about the robots who are cleaning up at Auckland Airport. They are literally like that too. When I did this presentation in a school recently, they were very disappointed they weren't robots with arms that went along and cleaned the floor at Auckland Airport. But Auckland Airport let 12 people go and replace them with those robots. They did say, OCS, the company who have the contract, that they would retrain the cleaners to maintain the robots. Be very interested to know if that's what they actually do, but that sounds like a nice idea. The one on the right probably sums up how I feel about the changing technology. This was announced in March, and one of the government ministers was very excited to learn that we would be the first country to use Domino's pizza delivery robot. For me, I want New Zealand to be the country where we're designing and building those robots, not just being the test bed for them. And that's the real trick in the future of work, is that we get at the high value end of this, not just to be a passive recipient of technology, and that is one of the dangers that we've got. I won't dwell much more on these bits. We set up a Future of Work Commission. We put all sorts of people on it, including people who don't support the Labour Party. There were one or two of them around, so we found them, and they helped us out with putting together the commission. It's been a fantastic process. In fact, there's a name of a person who has been helping us out who's no longer on the commission, because I asked this reference group to challenge the Labour Party as being part of this, and this particular person took that a little too seriously. Her name's Victoria Cronin, and she's now challenging Phil Goff to be the Mayor of Auckland. So she's not with us anymore, but she's been very helpful. We established the commission, and we're about, we're just over halfway through, in fact, a bit more than halfway through. We've got our final report coming in November. We've had some fantastic responses, and that's the document that Duncan mentioned before. I'm not going to go through the 10 big ideas because we don't have time, but I'm going to mention 2 of them specifically. By the way, if any of you are interested, I've got some extra copies of the booklet that I'll leave outside for you to grab. It's also online as well, and you can see the more detail. This is probably one of the most important, the notion of digital equality. So we used to talk about the digital divide, the idea that some people have access to technology and others don't. We want to flip that around, and one of the things we've learned from our consultation process is that there are still major gaps in terms of who has access to technology. According to the Computers and Homes charity, there are 300,000 New Zealand homes where people do not have regular access to the internet. If you think about the young people growing up in those homes, they are already at a disadvantage unless we do something about it. So we're focusing on the ideal of digital equality as being one of the main things we're doing. We've got a host of ideas about how we might achieve that. I'll move through these, so I won't talk about them, but they're all drawn, these ideas are all drawn from the consultation we've been doing. Businesses, and Anthony knows all about this, businesses not really knowing how to use the technology that is around them to maximise the value of their businesses. How do we get businesses to cluster together to maximise advantages? The idea of building wealth from the ground up. The opportunity is huge to do this now, for people to start their own businesses, to be entrepreneurs, but how do we create those opportunities? What barriers are in the way of doing it now that we can eliminate? Very important to help people retrain. It's one of the most critical things we can do. With due respect to my good friend and colleague, Dr. Michael Cullen, we knew that 500 people were going to lose their jobs at New Zealand Post. We've known for a long time that the postal service is declining, yet we wait until the jobs are lost before we start to work out what to do for those people. We've got to do better than that. Talk about universal basic income if anyone would like to later. Moving on. We desperately need to change the transition between school and work and training. Careers advice is still given by part-time teachers for the most part. We should be doing far, far better by our young people in terms of bringing business, industry, training providers into schools to help people manage that transition out of school. 87,000 15 to 24-year-olds are not in education, training or work at the moment, and we have to be able to do better than that. And our big policy that we announced at the start of the year, which is that in this world, the best thing we can possibly do is give people the opportunity to get new skills, to train and to retrain. And our proposal is effectively to extend the education system out so that everyone has access to 3 years' worth of training and education past school. That's the first of the flagship policies we've announced. There'll be a few more. I have just hit 15 minutes and 2 seconds, Kerry. Thank you.
Right, we've got time for a couple of questions. Has anyone got a burning question they'd like to ask Grant? So we can, while you're about to acknowledge someone, we can get the 10 big ideas online?
Yes,
you can put up the website?
If we go to the bottom, I'll get that.
Okay. Question?
Grant, has that policy number 8,
yep,
free education post, has that been costed?
It has indeed, and it works out once it's fully rolled out to be about $1.2 billion a year. We're putting my finance hat on. We have been extremely careful in how we're rolling this out. So we're rolling out 1 year, and then a couple of years later another year, and then it's finally fully rolled out by 2025, assuming we get into government next time. When we costed it, it was happily about the same amount of money that the government at that point had put aside for tax cuts. It's about priorities.
Trisha, last question, and then I'll get Duncan to do the vote.
Familiar with the Manai Kalani work in, and Ken Hill interviewed somebody on that on Saturday, and this is a similar project in Whangarui.
That's
Have
right.
you got any comments on how those projects address
Yeah.
the digital inequality issue?
Manai Kalani is a fantastic model involving going into effectively to low decile primary schools and getting the technology available and provided. They are good models. The problem with them is that they are difficult to roll out through a charitable model, essentially across the country. And so our view is that we actually have to make sure that every school has access to this technology. One of the things, and I was talking to Pat Snedden from Manai Kalani the other day, that one of the things we've all learned is that the pace of technological change is one of the things that's catching up with all the very good works that people do. So if you're supplying a device, a laptop, it's redundant within 2 or 3 years. And so working through those programs as to how we make sure that what we provide can be upgraded quickly. We used to have a policy of putting a device in the hand of every child who was entering school. We're looking a little bit differently at that and allowing them to use different devices as they go on. But those models are good. The